So there you go, Eduardo, machine learning engineer at Union. He's focused on the open source aspect of Flyte. So he's really one of the forces behind making Flyte what it is. Now, where we go with Flyte is the topic of this presentation. Obviously, releases, upcoming releases. We'll have Eduardo give us an overview about what's next, and also a little bit into topics like Ray integration and the overall, which I think very cool deployment story to talk about. So stage is yours, Eduardo.
Amazing. So, as Martin was saying, my name is Eduardo. I lead the OSS development at Union. Let's keep going. I'm gonna talk about a little bit about the 1.2 release and what happened there, what's happening there. So, Sandra, can you go to the next slide? So, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail into some of the perf improvements that we made during this latest release, but I want to emphasize two features that were added in this release. I expect that we're gonna talk more about them in this sync up in the coming weeks, but just to whet your appetites, like we at Union, in the Flyte project, we value performance a whole lot, and especially when you start thinking about having Flyte operating at scale, like performance becomes like really the defining feature of the orchestrator. So one of the features that people or Babis from Spotify worked on alongside with our very own Dan during this last cycle was the ability to offload the CRD static workflow spec to a blob store. Like that speeds up the scheduling of workflows, because that CD now can breathe more better. Another feature that we added, it's still an ongoing work, but it's slated for the 1.2 release, is a cache that we're adding in Propeller, so that if you have workflows that contain multiple cache tasks, you're gonna see a huge improvement in those. Just also calling out like a couple of bug fixes that we made that will also impact perf. If you're running on GCP, we had a very a tiny bug that was causing us to write to GCS more frequently than we should. This is fixed, so you're gonna see for free. You don't have to enable anything. You just like improve your workflows, but the performance of your workflows. We also fixed this bug where sub-workflow inputs were being written more than once, which was great. Then work on this idea of having a sub-queuing side of Propeller, so that we can get updates coming from pods in a faster way, which means scheduling the downstream container pods will be a bit faster, because now we don't have to reach out to get the state of the pod. So all in all, the 1.2 release had a lot of focus on performance. And again, if you operate Flyte at scale, you're gonna see a massive improvement coming from the first and second items in this list. So Sandra, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. A feature that is coming this release is an integration with Ray. We already talked about this during this meeting, but just to reiterate how easy it is to integrate Ray into your Flyte workflows. At the very top, like that box there is the Ray decorator that you use to signal that you want to run that compute in a Ray cluster. The middle box is some glue code that we use in Flyte to define the configuration of the head node and the worker nodes in array cluster. And the bottom is our loved ones, the at task and at workflow Flyte decorators. Notice how the integration between the Ray specific code and Flyte is like very seamless. Like you basically don't think about like how to ship the code to Ray. It's all done using like this 3-step process where you write your Ray code, you write the configuration job for Ray and in your Flyte workflow. Let's go to the next slide. Let's dive a little deep into like how this actually works. So let's see on the left-hand side, you have your, oh, people are, the chat is super active today. This is awesome. As I was saying, on the left-hand side, you have, your Flyte Python code with, the add task and add workflow. And you want to run a task on a Ray cluster. You go through the usual process, like generating an image and registering it. But then it comes a point where you want to run your workflow. You go through the usual process of, kicking it off using either Flyte console, Flyte-CTL, or Flyte remote. That talks to the Flyte control plane, which, in itself talks to the Flyte engine. We lean heavily on the kube-Ray operator for this integration between Flyte and Ray. The detail here is that the task code runs in the Ray's head node, which is like the top portion of the Ray integration on the right-hand side. But all the Ray annotated code, with the Ray.remote decorator, it's actually shipped to the worker nodes in Ray. If you go back, can you go back one slide, Sandra? Sorry, I just want to emphasize one thing. So in the middle box, the one where we configure the Ray job, if you notice, there is a field there for configuring the worker node config. In there, you see a property called replicas that defines the number of nodes of worker nodes that you want in your ephemeral Ray cluster. So yeah, let's keep going. Go to the next slide, Sandra, please. Yeah, overall, kube-Ray is an essential portion of this integration. And as we've shown, like the idea of like integrating code that already runs in a Ray cluster with some code that is Flyte specific, it feels like pretty natural. You only have to write really the code between that spins up this ephemeral Ray cluster or connects to an existing Ray cluster. Let's go to the next slide real quick. We're planning some future work around this area. Right now, the integration only works for a single task. And we have a spec around like how to share this ephemeral cluster across multiple tasks, even like multiple workflows and sub workflows. You have some ideas there. I think the most exciting thing is that we want to extend this idea of officially calling these ephemeral clusters to other compute platforms, because today we already have a similar integration with Spark. It works the same way. We spin up a Spark cluster, run your Spark task, and then tear it down. Now we're doing this with Ray, and we have plans to do this with other compute platforms like Dask. Please go take a look at the blog post that we published earlier or last month for more details on how this works and a few examples. Another I'll call it a feature of this upcoming release is what we're calling the Getting Started tour. We feel that the Getting Started guide, like the current Getting Started guide, is useful, but it could be way more helpful to like beginners. So we want to make the natural questions that people have when they read the Getting Started more easily accessible. Examples, how do you go from like, hey, you have your local executions, how do you go to the cloud, how do you go to production, what is the actual process of getting Flyte workflows running in the cloud? I also want to emphasize that we value our docs very much. We hear from the community that, you know, people like our docs, but we feel that those could be even more helpful. And this is a call to action to, you know, look for the there's a bunch of GitHub issues on our main Flyte repo that would be great first issues related to docs. Again, it's not that we don't value, you know, coding contributions. It's great, but we also think that getting the community to contribute to docs is like absolutely valuable. So yeah, let's keep going, Sandra. This is just one example of like how we're thinking. You know, as I said, the Getting Started guide has it has some holes, and we want to make people like take the next steps when they decide to like give Flyte a try. We want to make those steps like more easily accessible. So here's like a list of a few of the steps that we want to make it feel very natural to people. Like, hey, you already ran the Getting Started guide that helps you get a sense of Flyte can accomplish, but now you want to, for example, run tasks, you know, with different images, which is like a feature that Fabio mentioned during his talk, where like, hey, this is a great feature that, you know, a lot of orchestrators don't do, and it is described in our docs. It's just not easily accessible, and we want to make that very apparent to people. Hey, this is a good feature that Flyte has, and beginners should know about them in a more easily accessible manner. You know, another example is like custom peep dependencies. You know, like we again, as Fabio mentioned, like everything in Flyte is version, and that includes the base images that you use. But we don't teach, you know, the beginners how to set up their workflows in such a way that, hey, now I need this extra dependency. The funny thing is like this is all described in the docs. It's just not easily accessible, and that's the problem that we want to solve here. You know, so another two examples, the tasks beyond Python. Like we have this, like Flyte is a multi-language system since its inception. You know, like if you really want to run your workflows like in other languages, like we have, you know, official support for Python and Java/Scala, but like there's contributions from the community coming from, you know, for like a JavaScript SDK, or we even like support for, you know, very low level like tasks, like, hey, you want to run your code in R or I don't know, Rust. It's this is all supported. It's just that we don't talk about it, at least from like a beginner standpoint. That's like it's hard to find, and once you know that thing exists, it's very easy to execute on Flyte. It's just, you know, it's kind of like the unknown, like the mentality of the beginner. Again, the idea here is to like hold the hand of the people who want to give Flyte a try, so that they can understand more easily what Flyte can achieve.
So Eduardo, real quick before we go to the deployment. So just a call to action. Just want to make this loud and clear right now. So you're looking forward to hear back from the community about, you know, how to get the started portion better organized, the segments in there that actually you're looking for feedback as well. So what's the way to communicate with this? A Slack channel, or how do you want people to reach out to you?
Yeah, it's a great question, Martin. Thank you. I did not make that super clear with the call to action. You know, reaching out privately on Slack or on the public Slack. Just if you see a GitHub issue that you think it's not prioritized now and you want to work on, just let me know. We can, you know, assign that to you, and you can work on it. It would be great. Or even better, like if you find a hole in the docs and you feel passionate about, you know, teaching the community about that, amazing. Go create the issue, assign it to yourself. Let's work. You know, the Flyte docs are an amazing resource, and they can always be improved. That's the idea behind this.
Okay, great. So basically, just dive in, get active, get busy,
Yeah.
and then you will pick it up. Cool. I like this a lot. All right. So now you have another segment. You talk about the deployment journey. What is that?
Yeah. So we hear, you know, we hear from the community that like Flyte is this powerful system that it's not necessarily the easiest to work to start working on. And even when you have a system working in you know, you're passing the point of having a POC. Like how do you take the next step? You know, we want to teach people and make it very easy so that they know what to look for when they are considering taking Flyte, you know, from a local, you know, development environment all the way to production, even like operating Flyte at scale. So let's talk a little bit about this. So Sandra, you go to the next slide. So first, you know, we have it didn't come in this really came in the 1.0 release, but we have this thing that we call the demo cluster. It is the easiest way to get started on Flyte. Like you just do Flyte-CTL demo start and you're good to go. This is a great feature to get started on the platform. Like, hey, if you're iterating on, you know, locally on your own box or in a small cluster, like you just use the demo cluster to iterate on small workflows, get your feet wet with how the Flyte programming model looks like. The demo cluster is a self-contained image that runs in a Docker container, and inside of it, we run the Flyte binary containing, you know, both the control plane, the data plane, and the UI elements like Flyte console and whatnot. And in that image, we also run a K3s cluster that runs the secondary elements that you need in order to run a Flyte deployment, like a Postgres database. You have like an object storage. We use many of it. Again, the demo cluster is like the great entry point for like trying out Flyte. You know, it's easy to download. It starts out super quick, and it gives you the entire experience of like iterating with Flyte. But once you're there, like how do you take the next step? Like how do you think now about how to go to the cloud? So Sienna, can we go to the next slide? Here's like a list of things that now that you want to take the next step, like it's a small subset of requirements that you need to think about now. First, you have to decide like where you're gonna run it. Like we have docs on like running this, running Flyte and installing Flyte on EKS, GKE. As I mentioned before, like you need a database. You know, in AWS you have Postgres compatible, the Aurora database, but like you need a database, you need an object storage. You need to start thinking about IAM roles, service accounts, cluster roles, bindings, like all the Kubernetes specific constructs. Some of those are required to actually install Flyte on the cloud, but it's at that point that, you know, you can take advantage of what Flyte can do once you are in a K8s cluster, right? It's at that point that you can start running some of the already existing plugins. Like, hey, now I want to experiment with my Ray code, you know, that I already run separately. Now you want to orchestrate that with Flyte. You have some Spark code. You want to connect this to Presto. Typically, when you are at this stage, you are still running both, the control plane and the data plane in the same cluster. So, a natural question at this point is like, hey, how do I take this notion that, hey, now I can separate, I can make sure that, not everyone has access to the control plane. I can run the data plane in separate clusters. Like again, this idea that there is a natural progression of like how you think about Flyte installations, Flyte deployments, right? Let's go to the next slide, Sandra. Now you got to production. Now you have, your team of data scientists, ML engineers. They're all, they fell in love with Flyte. They want to try it. They want to integrate it in their production scenarios. Most like these top two items here, like how do you configure ingress, TLS certificates, DNS, and authentication, are the most support heavy items in our list. Like we get questions about ingress and authentication from the community because, well, especially when you talk about authentication, like there's it is a thorny subject, and everyone does authentication a little differently, but we work with the community to make sure that you are able to, for example, use your own corporate IDP when authing to Flyte, securing access, to the control plane elements, scheduler, propeller, like this is all supported in Flyte. We just want to make this even simpler for people who want to get to this stage. It is right here when you also have to think about, hey, what is happening with the cluster? You have to set up like observability, Prometheus, and all that. Flyte produces, I'll call it a choke full of information in terms of like what's actually happening at the Flyte layer in terms of updates to workflows, executions, and all that. So you can set up your event streaming around that. And it is right here when you have to think about integrating CI, CD in your workflow to help people register Flyte entities, schedule executions, get logs, get the usual CI/CD like pipeline that people think about. And finally, when all that is all said and done, like it's time to go live, to really think about like how Flyte can help you scale your workflows. Sooner, can you go to the next slide? It's like, again, from the get-go, performance was a big feature in the Flyte design. Like we want to make sure that people who need the scale, they can get it from the system, And one way that we've seen people do this is they very consciously, they separate the control plane from the actual data plane, like the clusters that are going to run the compute. So you can run, Flyte console in one smaller cluster, doesn't have like heavy machines, but you can start thinking about having, compute separated or segregated by machine type, or there's all sorts of knobs that you can think about how to separate, compute from the management of your workflows. And Flyte allows for that. It's not like you have to worry about like writing that glue code. It's right there for you to grab. Again, performance. Like it's a big feature from the system. We like in this release, we worked a lot on it, but it's been a consistent effort from the team and the community. And I advise you to, once you get to this stage and you need the kind of performance that Flyte can give you, go visit docs. Like there's a lot to experiment there. In terms of the community, you should think about giving back a little bit from what you get from Flyte. So joining meetings like this one are a great way of giving back to the community. Don't forget to join the Slack channel workspace. It's just go to https slack.flyte.org. We try to develop Flyte in the open as much as possible. So if you go to the Flyte repo, you're gonna see like a list of issues, tagged by milestone with, we try to be very cognizant about like issues that are good first issues. So if you're feeling you got the bug, the contribution bug, just visit that and assign an issue to yourself. Talk to us, make Flyte better. Start the repo, tell your friends, use that in production. Like Flyte can, as you know, we got from Fabio earlier today, like we are seeing a lot of evidence that Flyte can help you orchestrate your workflows. And this is a very, very minor update. Like we already talked about this, but we changed the release cadence of Flyte. We want to make the system more reliable, more stable. So look out for releases coming every quarter. And there's one coming at the end of this month, like September. And yeah, let's make Flyte better.
Fantastic, Eduardo. I love the material. We're almost at the top of the hour, so we've got to rush a little bit. I would love to see this information also on the Flyte.org website, because it's really important. Just like what Fabio shared with us, it's a journey. And once you know the steps a little bit better and what the dependencies are, things get a lot easier. So this is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing this information. So Sandra, let's do a quick links and resources overview. So office hours, I want to mention, there are office hours with Haitham and Katrina and Kathan. So you see they are throughout the day. Take advantage of those office hours. I feel like a lot of really good questions could come up here, and you have access to the community. It's amazing. So note the times and get onto the ad event and make sure you're there. Upcoming sync is September 20th. We will have representatives from Infinium and Lacuna there. Lacuna is also very interesting. I haven't spoken with them so far in OSS Sync, but we'll do it on the 20th. It's going to be very interesting. And then what Eduardo said, I just reiterate, get there, join us, go on and join the Slack channel, star Flyte, please do that, pay a little bit back. We appreciate this very much. With that, I want to say thank you to all of the speakers, Fabio, Niels, Eduardo. I really appreciate your contribution today and the community for spending your time, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Have a great day.